curiouser and curiouser. Where is that rabbit?
Throughout all of Chapter 1 of Other Side, you'll see almost every part of the Redmond family in some way or another. Everyone except one person. And it's probably the most crucial person to the plot of the first episode, and to the history of this family. The scene you're seeing right now is from the upcoming Chapter 2. It's an actual place in Other Side, and here, everything is about her, because Other Side has a tendency to reflect reality in at least some way. In this video, I will attempt to explain the mysterious disappearance of June Redman, the events that followed, and explore the family dynamic of one of the two main characters of Other Side. This story is about how June Redman vanished from the face of the earth, how the Redman family fell apart, and what you should expect partially from Chapter 2, from the rest of the episode, and from the following series. You know, besides Clockmaster. Let's start from the very beginning. Every fantasy world needs just a little bit of reality, and before the fantasy and Other Side can begin, this is the real problems my characters have to face. A couple of years ago, in order to develop Dan and Ruby's parents, I decided to try one of those shipping prompt challenges for drawing. The result, to my surprise, actually may be better writing and understanding their dynamic. And I'll be completely honest, this is because I suck at writing canon couples. This is what I did for the prompt Doing Something Hot, by the way. I know, smartass. June Nelson, previously named This Abomination, you need to blame the fact I really liked Ace Attorney at the time for all of these stupid names, met her future husband, Howard Redman, after finishing university, where she was studying to become a journalist and a writer. Almost immediately after her grandfather's death, she inherited a small summer hotel by the beach, and with the help of her soon-to-be husband, it became the Redmond Hotel and Diner you know from Chapter 1. Speaking of the hotel, I really need to figure out what exactly it looks like. It's very difficult to find references for a small hotel that also includes a diner, but this is exactly what makes the Redmond Hotel special. That and, of course, June's involvement. Their relationship was not perfect by any stretch. Howard Redman was a pushover. He's often anxious, forgetful, and he doesn't deal well with stress. He's the kind of person who will lie and be nice to people just because of fear. So, I guess I mean people pleaser. June Redman is a dreamer. She lives in her imagination and always has big plans. Plans that her fiancé and soon-to-be husband always goes along with, no matter how insane they are. And most of the time it's because he can't stand up for himself. But they worked. Running a business together was proving to be successful, and they were happy. Happy enough to decide they want a family. So they had 2 kids, at first Dan, and then 5 years later they had Ruby. So a standard happy family that every protagonist has until they become an orphan or lose their parents or have to suffer the entire show, right? Or, okay, comic book. As much as I want it to be a show, it's not. And not exactly. You see, when you have a series you developed as a child or a teenager, when you go back you often see a lot of mistakes you've made because you were influenced by things you've watched as a kid. It's not like I did it on purpose or even knew about it, but a lot of the times female characters fall into being a plot device for the male characters to have their own arc. It's either a woman who needs to be saved, or a woman who died and made the male character who he is right now, love interest, or a woman who is secondary to the plot and is only shown when she is talking about the male character. Not only is that obviously wrong, but it also creates a flat character in your universe who could have had so much potential if they just had a personality and goals of their own. And June Redman was like this at the very beginning, when Other Side was just a video game. But right now, June Redman has a life of her own. Of course she's happy to be a mother and operate a business, but in her heart she always wanted to be a journalist. And so she does investigations about various things nobody really cares about on the side. And this is what makes the Redmonds realistic. Because really, no family is ever perfect, and certainly not this one. June Redman, no matter how much she likes being a mother, cannot forget about her dreams. And generally that's a good thing, but the family life consumes her so much that the dream of becoming a journalist takes over her mind more and more until it becomes an obsession. And eventually, June takes it too far. And then she's gone. Nowhere to be found, no contact, no letter, not even a body. Now, you may be wondering, why am I telling you all about this? First of all, this whole thing seems like just a big spoiler, and second of all, there's nothing even close here about fantastical elements of Other Side. No alternative dimension with sunflowers, no funky characters, just sadness and family drama. But what if I told you that's exactly where it gets interesting? This is something I really like writing about. Not the death part, but I mean realistic depictions of families, dysfunctional relationships, and things that are just about people. At the end of the day. Human, real problems and events that follow, wrapped in a fantasy setting. June Redman is gone. Dead, because at some point you really have to stop hoping. And everyone has to move on from it in some way. Howard Redman, the now widower, manages to keep the family together barely, but the business cannot operate without his wife. It's fine at first, but so many things about Redmond Hotel were about June. The creative touch, the risks they took, the daily operations too. And every day as Howard Redman fails more and more, he is more and more consumed by grief. His ability to function slowly declines as he falls into this depressive and anxious state. He no longer cooks for his kids as much, and when he does, something usually goes wrong. Slowly, the business gets worse too, because now they're in more and more terrible debt with the government. And Howard Redman does what he needs to do, going as far as lying to creditors, stealing, tax fraud, and as much as he can do to last as long as possible. He's terribly scared and he's not always good at it, but in reality he's not a wealthy, successful criminal who managed to rule a country, and his attempts at fraud are laughable at most. He's just a father trying to survive, put the food on the table, and give as much attention as he can to his kids in this terrible state. But despite all that, they still have a good relationship with the family because really, everyone gets it. Howard Redmond does not see a way out of this. He's too anxious and too poor to afford therapy now, and as a man who grew up in Turkey, it's just not how they do things there, the older generations especially. And so he tries his best, despite it getting worse and worse by day because he doesn't see any other way out of it, besides working as hard as he can. June was everything to him, and this is the price of not being able to let go. Do you see why I said Other Side is not for kids? Yeah, sure, swearing and blood is part of it, but this sort of stuff is really what I write about. And speaking of Howard Redman, all of this information initially doesn't track. When you're reading chapter 1 without any of YouTube spoilers, there is a scene where he's serving breakfast, and to you as a reader, it would seem at first like he's a neglectful father. Or at the very least a very strange one. And honestly I'm okay with that. I think it would make for a better experience if you get to see afterwards what caused this. 8-year-old Dan, influenced by the memories he had with his mom, gains a dream of becoming an author himself. He gets this craziness and dedication from June too, and the rest of his life up until chapter 1, and let's be honest, probably even further into the story, is dedicated to keeping that memory alive. Everything he does is in honor of her in some way or another. The hobbies he has, the clothing style, and just the way he is all influenced by the desire to be closer to her. One of those things happens to be taking care of Ruby, and it gets even worse when they eventually have to be alone. Dan takes on the role of a parent, largely because he understands that his dad needs help, and he wants to help more than anything. Dan doesn't know how to cook, so they don't really eat that well, but they always eat something. Whether it's Nutella and gummy worm sandwiches, cereal, or 100 different things you can do in the oven and not have to fry. Because you know what? Character that has to cook and learns how to be the greatest chef is a fantastic concept. But a character that has to cook but learns absolutely nothing and avoids complicated dishes as much as possible is even better. He just has different priorities, and really there's no one there to teach him. Dan also becomes protective of his sister, trying to make her life easier than whatever he is currently experiencing, even going as far as to not go to college to save up so Ruby can go instead. Both him and Ruby help around the hotel to save their dad costs on tap, and Dan really wants to finally make it big with the writing to save everyone from this terrible situation. And of course, this pressure of performing keeps him from having friends, because really, who needs friends when you need to take care of your family? And really, nobody understands anyway. All the friends he could have all focus on their own problems. He forever lives in the memory of her, because unlike Ruby, he still remembers what she was like. 3-year-old Ruby doesn't remember much about her mother, and only knows her from the stories she's been told. But the impact it has on her life is so significant she practically cannot escape it. Being the one in the family who was too young to understand and experience that loss fully, she's the most functional one of them. Personality and problems for her character are not shaped by loss, but they are shaped by what that loss did to everyone else. Ruby is overlooked, and at the same time she is the center of everyone's worries in the family. Everyone wants Ruby to be alright, to have the best possible life, to have opportunities, as the youngest member of the family and still a minor. But that comes at a cost of often being too protective, keeping secrets from her, and completely not listening to what she wants. In terms of this part, for Ruby, as I'm writing the script, I would like to at some point add a scene that demonstrates that. Maybe this could be a scene with both Dan and his father talking in secret about something related to the hotel, or even related to Other Side itself. Or maybe there could be a couple of different scenes where Dan is shown to be protective of Ruby over the years when they were kids. Or maybe there could be a scene of George accidentally telling her something she wasn't supposed to know because he's an outsider not from the family. Or even casually mentioning it to Dan that he doesn't understand the big deal about keeping secrets. Remember how I said it was pretty much essential to make June's character not flat and have a personality? Because all of this impact doesn't immediately make her have it. She's still, at this point of the video, very much just a dead woman that makes everyone else's arc make sense. Okay, but how do you do that if she's dead and she doesn't appear in the story at all? But wait, you may ask, you're describing all of these things, but they're not really in the comic book yet, right? Other Side is just starting to come out, and all of these concepts will eventually make it into the plot, trust me. I see absolutely no harm in telling you about them now though, but really, if you want to see more pages and chapters, I need your help with funding this stuff. You can consider getting some shirts and prints, donating a little bit to the cause, or getting a commission from me. I can draw Other Side characters doing things you want them to be doing, and it helps me put food on the table so I can go back to my desk and make pages. I also finally figured out how to ship orders. No thanks to Terrace, because it took me 4 damn days to understand even remotely what I'm doing. The wonderful experience of shipping something to the United States. Writing June Redmond is going to be a significant challenge, because above all, I want to make her a realistic dead person. Very often in stories, we tend to downplay severity of someone's death, and especially considering the previous dead mother of main character problem I discussed earlier, the pisses me off, I need to put effort into making her death, or disappearance, feel like she was a real person at some point. There's a couple of ways I can go about this though. First of all, any flashbacks involving her have to feel realistic. June Redmond was a mother, but at the end of the day she was a very unique kind of person. For example, instead of writing about her singing lullabies, I would go for her singing her favorite pop songs to her children. She was also not the most responsible mother in the world. She would be the kind of person to very often let her kids do dangerous things because she thought it was fun, and she would engage in it with them. Something like climbing over the fence and stealing apples from the neighbor's garden would be about her. I really would want to emphasize that in some ways, she never grew up. This whole thing doesn't only apply to flashbacks, but also to stories told about her. Second of all, the story of what led to her death will be developed at some point and needs to be developed beyond a simple death. What I really want to emphasize here is that she wasn't just randomly killed or kidnapped, even though things like this happen very often. Instead, her disappearance happened directly because of the last journalistic investigation she was participating in. What kind of investigation? Well, it's not something I can even begin to tell you yet. Partly because it will have to do with a lot of spoilers, but partly also because I still haven't written it, and chances are a whole episode will be dedicated just to this. So you probably wouldn't like it if I just told you everything right away, right? There still are more secrets that June Redman is hiding. Third of all, and this is probably obvious, but she needs to have actual weight in the current story of Other Side, beyond just the impact she had on the family. What I mean by that is, if you didn't notice, Other Side is not just about the drama of the Redmond family. In fact, it's mostly about absolutely fantastical things. So essentially, June Redmond and her personal arc has to tie into the story with all that blood magic and ritual and artifact business somehow, as well as serve as a main instrument to either explaining the main conflict, or explaining how the world works, or both. The last thing I want to mention before you go is how exactly this impacts the next chapter. The first whole episode, or the first story arc if you will, is going to focus primarily on Dan. And although I don't think I can include all of this into the first episode only, there will be hints and dialogue I plan on making that relates to it. So there you go, now it's out there and you can hold me to my promise. I think this video is a writing exercise of some sort. You're going along with me to explore the topic I wanted to write about. But the more I talk about it myself, the more I get ideas about what I could do about it. But of course I'm not really sure how well this format's gonna hold up. I've never really seen anyone do this with their comic book or any project. So I guess if you like it, I'll see you another time.